What's up, guys? I just want to start this episode by saying the audio is messed up about halfway through on Jerry's end. My end is still totally fine, so when you listen to this podcast, Jerry might cut out randomly, but there is some information that I put in towards the end. Sorry about this. Hopefully, it doesn't happen again. I appreciate you guys for listening. I hope you enjoy the episode. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Right into it. I love it.
Right.
Love it.
You know what it is. You know who it is. We are back with another episode of the BGPerform podcast, brought to you by Pink Eye, because Jerry's got pink eye.
We got them fart eyes. If you can't tell, my right eye looks like it was just morphed with Steve Buscemi's. So it sucks, but it is what it is. We got ointment on it, so it looks extra shiny and nasty. So try to look on the other eye or at my mouth when I speak. If you're listening, lucky you. You don't have to worry about how I look.
There, Jerry.
Yeah,
because his pillows probably aren't clean. But anyway,
they are. I'm washing them as we speak.
No. Jerry is a clean guy. He's a clean guy.
Bro, it's crazy. Like,
just got a bad case. What?
I was gonna say, it's crazy. I have like the worst like case of OCD when it comes to cleanliness and like washing my hands. Like I wash my hands like doctors. Like I get under my nails. I go under each one. Every time I wash my hands, somehow this happens. So I don't know.
Well, it's all right. Might have just been a bad case.
Yeah, I don't know.
But we're here. How was the week?
The week was good, but also rough. You know, we got pink eye. We still are fighting off this cold. I'm on antibiotics for it. So we're just like I told Brandon, like, you know, when it rains, it pours. Like it's all just coming at once. But as a Viking, you know, we navigate the storm like a clear day. So we're fine. We'll be good. How about you?
Beautiful. It's been good. Good start to the week. Good start to the month, to be honest. We've been cooking. We've been moving in the right direction. Got a few new clients. Got a couple more that are in the mix that we're working on, kind of like onboarding and talking to. So that's been good. Looking forward to the weekend just to kind of chill, catch up on a couple things. But it's getting busy, which is good. Been asking for it, so I'm ready for it. Whatever comes, I'm ready for it.
I love it, man. This is what we asked for. We asked for the busyness. We asked for a little bit of chaos, and It's what we get. But we enjoy it.
That's what we get. So today we're going to be talking about if you want to be fit by summer. We got like 6 months until summer, probably 5.5 months, you know, but
yeah,
if you want to be fit by summer, what should you be doing today that's going to get you there? And I think this is a question that a lot of people ask. And I think that obviously a lot of people will have a different definition of fit, right? And I think that it's important for you to define what fit means to you before, you know, having this conversation. But I think the most important thing is that to get in shape by summer, to feel better about yourself, maybe that's a better way to put it, to feel better about yourself by summer, what should you be doing right now to prepare for that? And I think Jerry and I were talking a little bit beforehand, trying to kind of just organize our thoughts on it, because I think there is a lot you could do. Right. And I think for us, there's always the things that we know you should do: training, eating, sleeping, whatnot. And we want to kind of dive into a little bit more of the specifics of that. If you're someone who's new to the gym, if you're someone who might be new to the podcast, or just trying to figure out like, hey, I really do want to feel good about myself by the time summer comes around this year, and what should I be doing? We're going to dive into those specifics today to make sure if you start today, after listening to this podcast, it'll be on a Tuesday, then the rest of the 5 months, the rest of the 5 months until summer is going to be pretty straightforward and laid out for you outside of you just going to do the work.
This is arguably like the best time to lock in before summer too. Like you have a really big window to like see like progress and results.
Yeah. Anything to add to that before we dive in?
No, dude, I'm excited for this one. It's a good one.
All right. So to start, right? Like obviously the lowest hanging fruit here is working out. And I think if you want to get fit by summer, you obviously need to be training in some capacity. And I think Jerry and I have probably talked about this a lot. We probably repeat ourselves and probably mention this more than we should.
Yeah.
But when we talk about training, you know, most people don't really need to be training more than like 3 times a week. And I think if you do it the right way, 3 times a week of like strength training is really good. Sometimes 4, depending on your output and what you're trying to achieve. I normally you could do 5 as well. Like doing 5 is also an option, but I also think that there does come a certain point where you're kind of getting diminishing returns and you're not really able to fully maximize some of that stuff, or you need to have like all the other things on point to train heavy or lift 5 days per week. Now that doesn't mean we can't be in the gym more than 5 days a week, but I think that lifting full body for at least 3 days a week with a day or two of cardio on top of that is probably the schedule or the framework that you want to follow if you want to get in shape by summer, right? And what
Mm-hmm.
that might look like is Monday. I always like to lift on Mondays just because I enjoy lifting to start off my week. Cardio day on Tuesday. Wednesday would be a lift. Thursday is a cardio day or a rest day. Friday would be a lift, and then Saturday can be a cardio or a rest day or a lift day, whatever makes sense. Like you can just fill those days out.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about back and forth a little bit what we see as fit for that. But personally, if you're looking to get fit by summer, and if you hit a 3-day lifting per week and 2 days of cardio, and you do that consistently in the ways that we're going to talk about, you're going to be solid. Because the cardio doesn't have to be anything crazy. The lifting doesn't have to be anything crazy. Really, as long as we have all these other steps, and it's funny because a lot of these steps are going to be boring. I've heard it before, that sort of thing, but it's the answer, and that's
Mm-hmm.
simply the answer. And there's really nothing else to it. So, anything to add to that?
I would say, like, as we go into this, you can kind of categorize yourself in certain areas and see what works best. So, like, when we're talking about different ways to go about this, whether it's like that fourth day, like that Saturday on what we do there, like you might be in one camp where it's just like a little bit of rest. You might be in another camp where you could push it a little bit further. Be honest with yourself on where you're at with all of the little what's the word I'm looking for? All of the little like variations that may come with this program or throughout
Yeah.
life and through day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, yeah, so I think when we look at the 3 days per week, full body is always best if you're just starting out. That's what's going to get you the most bang for your buck. And if you do that 3 days per week, the way that I would break it down is I would start around like 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps, somewhere in that range, depending on the weight that you're using, with a tempo of some kind, maybe like 2 seconds control on the way down. If that was written out specifically, it'd be like 20x1 type deal. And work your way from there, right? I would choose one squat, one hinge, one push, one pull, one single leg, and one core and carry, right? And it doesn't have to be all those in a day, but choosing one of each of those throughout a session, or it can be like a circuit or something like that. Whatever it is, just hit one of those each day in that progressive order, and things are going to work out perfectly for you. And I think it's a very simple way to put it. But if you do that on Monday, Wednesday, Friday with progressive effort throughout the months and weeks. So, for example, day one might look like a goblet squat, an RDL, dumbbell bench press, a 3-point row, a lunge, reverse lunge, or a split squat, we'll say, if you're just starting out. And then like a farmer's carry? Cool. Doing that for, except the farmer's carry, but all of those movements for like 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps at a weight that's,
Mm-hmm.
comfortable, but that you can control through a full range of motion is going to be great. Then on the second day, you can kind of do that same idea. If you did goblet squat on Monday, maybe you could go like a leg press or some other type of squat pattern, some other type of hinge pattern, some sort of overhead pulling and pushing motion, and then some sort of single arm carry, something like that. And then on the third day, you could either repeat one of the other days, or you could just kind of go through and if you have a third movement that you enjoy doing, or you can just kind of hit some like vanity movements like that on the third days for that sort of thing. If I know someone's working out 3 days in a week, the first 2 days are like focused full body sessions. And then the third day is more of like a vanity session, you could call it. But like,
Mm-hmm.
you're working on arms, you're working on the little muscles of the upper body, working on stuff that you probably normally wouldn't hit, just because they're really good ways to get work on the body, but not really take too much away from somebody energy wise. So I think that's the important thing there. But I think if you do those three, and interject where you want to, Jerry, but
Yeah.
do those 3 days with full body movements. And then on the other days, something as simple as walking for 30 minutes, biking for 30 minutes, uh, hopping on a stair stepper. I've been crushing a stair stepper, and that shit sucks. I've been doing that like crazy.
Sucks in the best
We did
way.
intervals today. Me and Nick did intervals today. We did basically an EMOM of like
Okay.
every minute or every other minute, basically like minute on, minute off of
Mm-hmm.
like the 14 level on the stairs, 13,
Mm-hmm.
14, and then drop it back down to like 5 or 6 for the off minute, and just did that for 10 rounds. And that just kicks my ass. Like I feel so exhausted when I'm done with the stair stepper,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's helping. And I'm excited to see how it helps with my running when I get back into running, because I
I'm
do
sure
think
it
it's
will.
gonna have a huge impact on it. Because I've been feeling pretty good on the stair stepper, like I'm moving well. It's just hard, and my legs are heavy. So,
Yeah.
anyways, um, something like that on those off days for no, it doesn't really even have to be more than like 30 minutes, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think, with that sort of thing, we can really just fit those pieces in where they need to be fit in.
Mm-hmm.
There's no like specific nature in which it needs to be done. You don't need to be doing these grueling conditioning pieces where you're on the floor gasping for air at the end of it. You also don't need to
Mm-hmm.
be running too consistently or at all, really, to lose weight and get in the best shape of your life. Running kind of speeds up the process, but it also takes a lot out of you. And there's a lot of things that go into that. So if you're just starting out and you have no desire to run, then what I would say is 3 days full body. And on those 2 other days, you pick the bike, the row, the skier. You could pick all of them, a stair stepper, elliptical, treadmill, something you could do consistently at a pace for 30 minutes without stopping, and start there and then kind of slowly progress that throughout the weeks and months. But anything to add?
Quickly, I'll say that I got a little notification on my screen that says that I might have bad internet connection. So if I cut out, I apologize. But never seen that one before. But going into those days, like Brandon said, you don't have to be like dying at the end of the conditioning days. I like my conditioning days. If I'm doing twice a week, I typically do one a little bit slower, one a little bit faster pace, just because I like to mix it up throughout the week. You could do too slow, you could do too quick, whatever your vibe is, as long as you're recovering. So those days where you're typically gasping for air at the end, it's more than just a cardiovascular fatigue. Like it's a lot on your nervous system, it's a lot on your body. It's going to require a little more recovery. So if you're one of those people who, and I'm one of those people, especially right now, at readapting to altitude, I'm actually struggling with sleep more than I usually do. Less oxygen in the night. I'm already have a deviated septum. It's hard for me to breathe at night in general. So give me less oxygen with that. It's already tough. That recovery isn't coming as easily. I'm sleeping more than ever before, and I'm still struggling a little bit. So those high intensity cardio days and conditioning days, I'm kind of shifting away from that a little bit, and I'm going more toward the steady stuff if I'm doing cardio throughout the week.
Yeah. And I think that's, the way you put that is perfect. And I think that the only thing you have to watch out for is just consistency. Like that's all. And you just don't want to do anything that's going to get in the way of you stopping training. That's all. So if you can handle it, that's cool. I can handle it. I've done lifting and running in the same block consistently for literally like the last 8 months. I've only recently, like the last month and a half to 2 months, not really been uh, running as consistently. But outside of that, you know, it's something I can do and I can handle, and it works pretty well for me. But I think for the average person who's just trying to get in shape, just find something that's consistent that you enjoy, and stick with that. So, along with that, well, actually, nothing else to add on the weightlifting side. I think we're pretty set there, right? Just 3 days. And if you have more experience, obviously, you can kind of go through that. You can do push pull legs. You can do upper lower, like whatever makes sense for you. I just think if you're new in the gym, this is. No, I was gonna say, if you're new to the gym, then this is probably the way that makes the most sense for you to stay healthy and get the most out of it. Yeah, or we'll send you the podcast episode, because we had a series at the beginning of last year, I believe, when we talked about a lot of this stuff. But anyways, so next step, and I think this is probably one of the most underutilized steps and one of the easiest steps, literally, pun intended, steps. Get as many as you can as often as possible. I think a lot of people harp on like the 10K steps per day type thing, and they have been for a while. Realistically, if you can hit between 6 and 10,000 steps, that's good, because I think 10,000 steps is about 5 miles in a day, and realistically, we should be hitting that. Yeah. So I think, 8,000 is a great, step count for you to hit. I think 6 is a great starting place, working your way up to 8. And if you really do have the time and know you can do it, then 10 makes the most sense there. But I think just steps is a great way to just add in extra cardio, extra movement, and literally just keep you moving. Because I do think at the end of the day, a lot of us in today's world, especially if you're not like our type of job where you're up all day or on your feet, or and I'm not saying I have a hard job. Well, I'm not saying I have a demanding job physically by any means, but when you're on your feet all day, that sort of thing, you get your steps in. Like, I walked for about 30 minutes this morning after my workout, and I'm about to hit 10,000 steps after my sessions as well. So really what matters is just getting as many as you can and trying to get that number up consistently and doing that each and every day. So if it makes sense that you hit 5,000 every single day, I'd rather see that than 10,000 two times a week, right? Like don't get caught up in that 10,000 number. Get caught up in like, hey, I'm going to try to get as many steps in as possible throughout the week as often as possible and do that. And then as you work your way up, you're going to respond and adapt to that more, and you're going to build resilience, and you're going to be able to go from point A to point, Z with steps and get from that 5,000 to 10,000 soon. And you'll be able to do that consistently. And once you build the habit and like, for example, the route or the amount of time it takes, that sort of thing, then it easily, you know, fits itself in. And if you do that on top of training 3 days a week, and even on top, like, oh, this is the other thing too, like that walking can be the cardio on the other days, right? Like that, it could, if you're just starting, like just building that up can be the starting point for cardio. I do recommend obviously increasing that intensity as the weeks go on, but that can be a great starting point, but then something you'd want to keep up even if you're doing the other stuff as well. Yeah. It's the same thing with like losing weight. Like, you got to do that slowly over the course of like a week. Have a small enough deficit that you're able to continue to do what you got to do, but have a deficit long enough that it accumulates over the course of a week and you hit that number that then brings you down a certain amount of weight. So, and really that's kind of like getting into the next point anyways, which is food tracking. So it's a good segue. Food tracking, what tends to happen is a lot of people try to go too fast with it, right? And they try to go, okay, I'm going to start working out. I want to look good by summer. I'm going to jump into macros. And I think that's probably the worst thing you could do, because macros are very mentally demanding. They're very physically demanding as well. And they can really be difficult to manage if you don't have the proper skills beforehand. And we've talked about this in earlier podcasts, whether it's the 8 factors you need to be successful, whether it's just building awareness, whether it's, something as simple as like being able to cook, right? Like that kind of limits what you can actually eat, depending on how, what you want to eat, but depends on like how you can make it, how you can serve it, that sort of thing. But I always start out like, if someone came to me and was like, "Hey, I want to be fit by summer. What do I need to do today?" The first thing I would do like today is just start tracking food in regards to like just write it down on a notebook and just look it over and just say, "What am I eating? When am I eating it?" And kind of answer to yourself like, "Why am I eating it?" This builds awareness, and this literally just starts to look at like, okay, what are we actually eating on a daily basis? And we do that for like a couple weeks, maybe sometimes a month, depending on like how much work we need. And then we start to kind of dwindle at the sometimes it's adding protein, sometimes it's taking away overall calories, sometimes it's just changing the food options out. Like, instead of my go-to is like, if someone's eating a whole case of Oreos before they go to bed, like let's try to dwindle it down to like half, and then let's try to dwindle it down to a sleeve, and then let's try to just get rid of it completely. Because most of the time when you start to take on too much at the beginning, then you give it up on one day when it goes. So you might be working out 3 to 5 days per week. You might be changing your nutrition, and then you got to change a lot of these foods, and you got to shop for things you never shop for and make them in ways that you've never made them. And then you get frustrated, and then you stop, and people wonder why, right? Now, working out to me, the fitness stuff is the lowest hanging fruit and the most easily accessible. Obviously, food is very accessible as well, but there comes skills with that. Anybody can go to the gym, hop on a couple machines, do that sort of thing consistently, especially if you can find someone who can help you. But the food is the part where it's like you're at home by yourself. You got to make the right decisions at the right times and continue to do that consistently. And that tends to be very hard for people because it's, you can make up pieces of a workout by doing other things, but you can't really make up a bad meal, uh, multiple times during the week, right? Like you can still do miss on a workout or mess up on selection or execution and still get something from it, but it's not the same as nutrition. You can make changes and still get a lot of benefit from it, but if you're trying to like be in shape, then we got to be really strict with nutrition. And I think the best way for me that I've seen is doing it is tracking awareness, making decisions and changing some of those decisions to make it better and more efficient. And then if we're still not seeing results, or if we're still kind of struggling, or we want to take it to that next level, then we can sit down and consider macros and start to have that conversation, because that's when things get a little bit more serious and can be very mentally challenging. Most of those are like shit though. Like they're adding, you're getting 10 grams of protein, but you're also getting 23 and 24 and 28 grams of carbs and 10 grams of fat. So it's really like it's hard. Yeah, and I think also the protein stuff might also be a little bit overblown in regards to like how much you actually need. I think sometimes people force themselves to eat more protein, and that's where a lot of these protein snacks and protein options come in, because people are like protein, 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 instead of just like, hey, I could eat real foods and I could still hit that calorie goal while maintaining it. Because there are things like, obviously the more protein you get, it tends to be a little bit more of a satiating macronutrient. So it's like the more protein you get, the less hungry you are, the better your muscle recovery is going to be. But you also most of the time don't need 1 gram per pound of body weight or muscle mass or whatever it ends up being, because you end up forcing things or eating bad options just to hit that. And sometimes, the case is just like stay under that calorie mark, get as much protein in as you can, and go from there. This also doesn't mean, eating a bunch of other carbs and fats just because. It's, you still want to try to make protein the main focus. I just rather not see people go like out of their way to get, protein option A to say, oh, I got to get to my protein goals. And I think that's it with that. And I think macros, yeah, when you start to implement macros, you're taking a serious step where it's like, I have to measure my food. I have to, weigh my food. I have to write my or mark it down, track my calories, how much protein, how much fat, how much is in this sauce, how much is in this beet. And it starts to get overwhelming. And a lot of people can't handle it. And you can get a lot done by just nutritionally guiding somebody as opposed to like giving someone macros. Does that make sense? Good. And then from there, I think the last two kind of go hand in hand, but like sleep schedule, right? Like trying to make that as consistent as possible. And I think the consistency has a lot more to do than maybe the amount of hours. Obviously, like the 6 to 8 hours is huge, and that's something that you need to try to get. But I do think the consistency is important of like when I go to bed, when I'm getting ready for bed, and then when I'm waking up, even on the days that I'm not doing stuff, because that's what allows you to get into that rhythm, know when your body's waking up, when it's starting to get tired, and it gets really good at that, and it helps you to sleep better. And I think the problem a lot of people face is they go to bed at certain times or different times, they wake up at different times, and they're not, they're going through REM sleep in the middle of waking up, and then they're not going through REM sleep, and they're, not sleeping deep, or they're just not going through a lot of those processes because for one reason or another, they're going to sleep later, or they're waking up later, or they're going, whatever it might be, and it catches up, and then you kind of like fall off track, and the sleep is the one that kind of has an effect on everything else indirectly, right? If you don't sleep, there's a lot of research that your cravings turn up in regards to the bad things, high sugary foods, processed foods, things that are very simple, because your attention span's a little bit worse, your patience is a little bit worse. Physically, you become a little bit more exhausted. So when you go to the gym, you think you're doing more, but you're not. And you're not burning as many calories, or you're not creating as much adaptation, and then you're not getting the work. And it's just this constant process on top of each, or basically this constant stacking of things on top of each other, that when you don't sleep, you miss out on all the benefits of sleep. And we're not even talking about the cell regeneration, the brain, essentially like your brain cleaning itself at night, going through that whole sleep process, and then like getting through REM sleep, and how important that is for brain health and long-term function. And getting that 6 to 8 hours at the same time every single night is the most important thing, because that's what gets you the, again, not only just sleep, but gets you the most efficient sleep that's then going to translate into less cravings, better training, better output, all that stuff, and it's all going to kind of like fix itself. It's funny. I had a guy. Yeah. So it's a pretty kind of sad story. I don't know if I think most people, unless I hope this is true, because otherwise I'm just spewing fucking nonsense. But there was a teacher at my school, and he was a health teacher, and apparently he always used to say like he would only sleep like 2 hours a night. He was like, I don't need sleep, blah blah blah, like sleep this, sleep that. I don't know. And then I found out like 10 years later, dude was like schizophrenic, like in his mom's like living in his mom's basement, and I would assume because a lot of it was the sleep stuff, like he wasn't sleeping properly. I've also heard a lot of bad stories where people said, "Hey, I don't need sleep. I don't need a lot of sleep. Blah blah blah. This and that." And that happens, and they end up having dementia. They end up having Alzheimer's, all that sort of like brain problem, neurological type stuff because you can only do that for so long. And while they do say there is like a certain gene code that allows, yeah, like 1% of the population has where they don't need sleep or they only need like 1 to 2 hours of sleep. I'd imagine that's beyond rare. And who doesn't love a good sleep? You know what I mean? So it's like find the time to sleep, even if it's naps, naps obviously are probably like second. You want to try to get a good night's sleep first, but it's something where it's like that matters the most. And the more you can sleep, the more consistent your sleep can be. It literally just trickles down on everything else and makes everything else more efficient and effective. And you're going to get better results because of it. Yeah. It's like a protein shake. Naps are the protein shakes of sleep. Yeah. And then last but not least, unless there's something else you want to add to that, but last but not least is the obvious one, managing stress. And I think with sleep and training, a lot of this can be managed, but trying to do your best. Obviously, we're human. We have things going on. We live life. We got kids, some of us. I don't, but or you don't either. But, if you have kids, things can get stressful, things can happen, and you just got to kind of deal with it. And you got to kind of find a way around it. But if you can manage stress and you can sleep, like if you're sleeping better and eating and walking and training, like your stress is probably going to be low, right? Obviously, I can't speak for everybody, but like you'd hope your stress is low because you're physically fit, you're mentally aware, you're recovered, and you're able to kind of like handle things and think about things a little bit deeper and more rationally. And all of that kind of helps you manage stress in an effective way so that, that's kind of like the bow on top, right? Like once you're training, once you get your steps in, once you're eating well and you're sleeping, like managing stress tends to be the thing that like is a little bit more efficient there. And you could see that most people who aren't great at managing stress usually aren't the best at taking care of themselves either, because it's not that taking care of yourself is a stressful thing, but it's difficult, and it's like you're not going to have the best day every single day. It's not always going to be a great workout. You're not always going to sleep great. And some days you kind of just have to like push and do it regardless if you want to or not. And I think that just finding those ways, those consistent ways, right? Whether it's a hobby or whether it's, spending time outside or spending time around people who don't stress you out, like making those decisions is really important long term for success. So I would say, like, if you're trying to get fit by summer, as little stress as humanly possible for the next 6 months. Yeah, and I think overall, I think the last thing I want to say about it is that, like, if you're struggling, if you're mentally trying to find a way to be successful in the gym, like less is more sometimes, right? And I think some people think you have to do these crazy workouts and make all these crazy changes physically and mentally and nutritionally and all this stuff. And I just think if you can consistently show up every single day and do something, you're going to make progress, right? Obviously, again, this is where it comes back to what I said in the beginning is like we want to define what fit means to us. Because, if you're coming to me and being like, hey, I want a six pack by May, and you're 40% body fat, probably not going to happen, right? If we're being honest. But if being fit by May means like I feel good enough to go for a run on the beach, or I feel good enough to like go hang out with my family and play outside with the kids, or play in the the summer baseball league or the kickball league or something like that, then like we can make whatever it is, we just got to know so we can build the program around that and make sure you're getting what you need. Because even in those severe cases where it's someone who's like, hey, I want to have a 6-pack for summer, it's like, cool, are you willing to do this to get there? And you'll know right away, because they're either going to say yes and they're going to do it, or they're not. And I think it's really as simple as that, fitness wise. And then fitting those other pieces around it, like, are they willing to make those changes? Are they willing to execute on the sleep game plan and the nutrition game plan and the steps game plan and the fitness game plan, and putting that into place? But you don't need that much to get fit, right? Like, probably the most important thing is hammer home the sleep, get a good schedule there, make sure you're trying to get steps in, make sure you're getting to the gym 3 times a week, full body splits at the beginning. And then as you get, further along, maybe like 2-3 months in, if you're new and you get 2-3 months in, then we can kind of look at different types of splits. But even like if you're not new and you just want to get into a groove again, like, full body splits are great. And you can really push the weight on a lot of things and get a lot out of them. And then I thought you were going to say something, so I stopped. Yeah. And I think if you do that stuff consistently, and again, I think if we're talking about progressing, right? So let's quickly touch on that. Like, let's say you have all this down, you're in the first month, you've done 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps, kind of each week, slightly either progressing the reps or progressing the weight. Then we can, or let's say, let me take a step back. So let's say you're doing 3 times a week, full body, you're doing 10,000, or let's say 6,000 steps a day, and you're doing cardio 2 other days during the week, right? You're sleeping 6 to 8 hours consistently, and you've been doing a great job managing stress. From there, we'd want to really look into progressing either the reps throughout the weeks or the weight throughout the weeks, right? We could progress the amount of sets we're actually completing. So it might look something like 3 by 8 the first month, then it's like 3 by 10 or 3 by 12. It could also look like 3 by 8 month one, week one, 4 by 8 week two, 5 by 8 week three, something like that. It could also look like movement one at like 3 sets by 8 for the first month, and then you change that movement and do the same thing for month two. There's a lot of different ways you can progress it. That's obviously where like the coach comes in, or you start to kind of do a little bit more research on like movement selection and progressions and things like that. But if you start at a point, you want to give yourself some room to grow, give yourself some room to progress. You can either change the sets, you can either change the reps, you can change the weight, you can change the positions, and progress those throughout the month. Nutritionally, like I said, starting early with just tracking, writing down what you're eating when you're eating it. Then the next step would really be to kind of go over that and make better decisions and start to clean things up, slowly dwindle stuff away, start to add in better options where you can. And then if you're feeling good after you kind of have a good situation set up with your training and your nutrition, then we can start to discuss macros and see if there's something that works. Sleep wise, get sleep. Just be as consistent as possible with your sleep. Try to get as much sleep as possible and do it as, around the same times, wake up around the same times, go to bed around the same times. And if you do that, like, you're going to be successful, and, you're going to be fit by summer. And then the speed at which it happens, or the degree to which that happens, is more based on your definition. And then, how far you're willing to go with it. So if you want to get fit by summer, that's the blueprint. And I don't know, there's not really anything else to add to that. I think the only other thing is to follow us on Instagram, at Coach Jerry Hayes or at BGPerform_. If you really want to speed up that process and you want to get in the best shape of your life, just reach out, because we got you, whether it's online or in person. You can reach out at www.bgperform.com/training, and that will connect you with either myself or Jerry. Or you can reach out on our Instagrams, like I just said, at Coach Jerry Hayes or at BGPerform_, and we can kind of set that up as well. If you're in Colorado and you want to train with Jerry directly, at Kula Sports Performance, I don't know, what's the city it's in? All right, Centennial. Or if you want to train with me, and at ABC Sports and Fitness in Latham, hit me up, figure it out. But I think that's it for today. I appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in. We've been having awesome views on the podcast. It's been great. I want to get the podcast to 100 views each episode towards the end of this year. That's kind of my goal. We're looming around the 20 mark. We're about 25, so we're about a quarter of the way there. So that was a good progression this year. If we can progress the way we've been, we should get to well over 100 by the end of this year. So I'm excited about it. But if there are any topics you guys want to hear, we got a couple things planned for the rest of this season. But if there are anything specifically you want to hear, because this was actually an episode that was recommended by a listener, Zach. So shout out to Zach if he's listening to this. And if you guys have anything you want to hear, questions, anything you want to hear us talk about, just let us know. And as always, we will see you guys next time.